Hi everybody, my name is Donna H and I'm an alcoholic. And I am so pleased to be here tonight. This is very, very special for me. I was invited by Al a long time ago. It's been at least a year, I think, around a year ago that he invited me to come. And I was really thrilled because my sponsor, whose name is Polly P., has spoken here a number of times. And she said, "Oh, you're going to love it. You're going to have a blast." And so I was looking forward to coming to Brazos, and then when I arrived at the airport, that's when I found out about Dawn. I didn't know, and I was just sick. I mean, I just felt like somebody had punched me in the stomach. Dawn and Karen were an integral part of my early days when I wasn't even sober back in Kona, and I'd be happy to tell about some of that in my talk tonight. My sobriety date is the 5th of May, 1987, and I am so blessed to be sober and to be an active member in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I can't imagine how I would be or where I would be if my life hadn't been changed completely. I want to tell you something else that I found out when I got here that tells me that there's no accident about why I'm here this weekend. It wasn't just about coming to Brazos to be able to share the weekend with you and to give a talk, you know. I always ask God at the beginning of every day and at the end of every day that He will help me to be the best servant for Him and others that I can be. And that's my daily prayer. So that puts me in a lot of situations where I'm able to say yes. And I say yes a lot. In fact, my husband complains about that. My health isn't all that great these days, and he, I had 3 weekends in a row of being gone, and he goes, "And now you're going to be gone next weekend." And I said, "No, I have a weekend off, and then I'm going to New York," So he's like, "Oh, well, I'm glad you're going to get some rest," But at any rate, I just say yes, and I say yes because I'm humbled by the life that I've been given. I just can't even imagine it. When I got here yesterday, I was reading in the program about the past speakers, the previous speakers that you've had here. And I looked under 1997, which was the year I got sober. So in October of 1997, you had a speaker named Phyllis C. from Paso Robles, California. Phyllis C. was the angel who carried the message to me in Kona. That without that woman, I mean, she saved my life. She came along at exactly the right moment with just the right words and just the right tone and personality that I could hear her. And she came along and saved my life. And I'm just so happy to be able to share all this with you guys tonight. I'm going to talk in a general way about what I used to be like and what happened to me and about what I'm like now. And I'm going to, I want it to be current. It's real important that I get to share with you some things. I just met Jack and his wife, and there are some things that I want to share with them that I think might be really helpful. And so I'll get to that, hopefully. Okay, God, do your deal. Now that I've told you what to do. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I grew up in a family where my dad was the alcoholic in our home, and he was a violent, angry man. He was full of fear and rage, and he was just a miserable human being. It was really weird to detect that because he didn't drink until he was 32 years old. He refused to drink because he didn't want to be like his dad. But the minute he picked up a drink, instant alcoholic. I mean, it was like throwing a match in a bucket of gasoline. Really interesting that my life paralleled his. I didn't pick up a drink until I was 27, and I did it because I didn't want to be like him. I didn't want to be like him. But when I picked up a drink, it was on. The same thing happened to my youngest daughter. She refused to drink until she was 27, and she picked up a drink and she was in trouble right away. And I want to tell you that because of Alcoholics Anonymous and good sponsorship and these steps in this program, my daughter celebrated 3 years of sobriety last year. And I am so grateful. She got sober in Southern California, and she fell right into the arms of those women that were there for me when I came down to Southern Cal. I was 2 years sober when I got there, but I was pretty raw. And they were all there for me. And there was some, I don't know if you've been there, but, anybody with a lot of money and a lot of time retires in Southern California. And so I went to these meetings, and I mean, it was uncommon for me to be in a meeting where there was somebody with maybe 20 years. I mean, most of them had 30, 35, 40. They were amazing women. They were long-term sobriety. My first sponsor there, I got sober in 1957. And I remember watching her take a 33-year cake. And I just, it welled up in my gut right here. And I just started to cry because I thought, I'll never make it. I'll never make that. That'll never be mine. But, the truth is, by God's grace, I'm sober here today. And I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing because I sure like what I'm getting. Anyway, I came from that alcoholic home, and I was the oldest of 4 children. My brother was 5 years younger than me, and my 2 sisters were 9 and 10 years younger than me. So there was a lot of age span, and my job was to stay home and raise the kids. And so, we came from this house of secrecy and violence and all that stuff. It was just, if you saw our family from the outside, you would have thought we were just this hunky-dory, great little family. But inside was all the rage and all that stuff was happening, and my dad was beating my mom, my dad was beating me. There were guns going off in the middle of the night, once my dad started drinking. And, it was scary, scary place to be. And I wasn't a rebellious kid. I sponsor a lady who was a rebellious kid. And she was, she comes from a place that says, no, and you can't make me. And I just wish I'd have had some of that in me. I mean, I'd probably ended up with a couple more broken bones, but I wish I'd have had some of that in me. But what I did was try to hide. I was a chameleon. I tried to, roll up in a ball and, just tuck and roll. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I really believed with everything in me that the reason those things were happening in my home was because there's something wrong with me, which ought to tell you that I qualified for Alateen and Al-Anon before I ever came to AA. I believed that it was my fault. I thought, if I could just be the right person, if I could get the right grades and have the right friends and say the right things, that they would love me and God would protect me and I'd be safe. And so I operated out of that illusion for a great many years, and never did it work. Never did it produce any of the results I was looking for. When I was 17, my dad got caught for some of the things that were going on in our home. And at that time, there was every form of abuse that could be happening in a home was happening in our home. And I got a lot of it. And he ended up getting caught. And we left town in the middle of the night in a blizzard and drove to Northern California. And they took me out of junior high. I was a junior in high school. They took me out of school and said, you're going to work. And I went to work at a little ice cream parlor down there. And I was terrified. 17 years old, I'd never been on a date. I'd never been to a dance or a football game or any of the things that any of the other 17-year-olds that I knew had done. Now, that's not a really big, sad, woohoo, too bad for me story. It's just the way it was. And the truth is, I didn't know any different. I didn't know what I was missing. All I knew was that I felt ugly and different. I felt, from the time I can remember, I felt like I didn't belong. And I didn't belong. I didn't belong in my family. I didn't belong at school. I didn't belong at work. I just didn't belong. I was awkward and goofy, and I always said the wrong things. I was real naive, and so I was always the butt of the joke. And I felt like ugly. I can tell you this. From the time I can remember, I walked around with a mountain of anger and guilt and fear and shame and self-loathing and secrets. And that was me when I came to the game. That was me before I ever picked up a drink. And to me, that's what alcoholism is. In the early part of the big book, in Dr. Silkworth's letter, he refers to it 3 times for sure, maybe 4 times. I'll have to read it again currently. But he talks about that Dr. Silkworth worked in a hospital that was nationally known for treatment of alcohol and drug addiction. He doesn't say alcohol, he says alcoholic and drug addiction. He doesn't say alcohol and drug addictions. He says alcoholic. There's a difference. You know, remember, when we came in the program and they told us that the bottle was just a symptom of our disease, that's what that means. You know, when the big book says that the problem with the alcoholic centers in his mind, that's what that means. So I thought if I could just not drink, that I'd be okay. But I wasn't okay before I started drinking. You know, I was a messed up kid. I had an alcoholic addiction. And that's different. You know, I also tell women that I sponsor today who, you know, that say a drug is a drug is a drug. I tell them, you know, that's not true. You know, if you put us all in a room and you gave us cocaine for a month, we would all come out of there addicted to cocaine in one way or another. If you put us all in a room and fed us alcohol for a month, there'd be some of us come out of there going, thank God that's over. You know, only those of us with an alcoholic addiction would have that hook, would have that alcoholism. And that's what makes me different, you know. I am an alcoholic. And, you know, I'm grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous differentiated that for me. It took me a long time. I read those pages thousands of times before somebody pointed that out to me. They said, look what it says. It says alcoholic and drug addiction, not alcohol and drug addiction. Anyway, so I came out of that home at 17 years old, and I'm at work, and I don't know anything about life whatsoever. And I worked for about a year, and I decided I wanted to go back to Billings, Montana, and spend Christmas with my friend. So I put some clothes in a little box, and I got on a Greyhound bus, and I went up to Billings, Montana to be like an adult. And I had just turned 19 years old, and I went up there, and she was having a Christmas party. And she said, why don't you come to the Christmas party tonight? There's this really cute guy I want you to meet. And I thought, you know, I wasn't really happy about guys. I was pretty turned off to guys. But I just thought, oh, God, that's just exactly what I don't need as a guy. But I tell you what, I was in that party that night, and in the room walked God's will for my life. I couldn't believe it. There he was, God's will for my life. He was good looking, he was slim, he'd been in the Navy, he was stationed in Charleston, South Carolina. All I know about that is it's a long ways from Billings, Montana. And I knew him 3 weeks. He asked me to marry him before he went back home. And I don't know if you realize this or not, but when someone asks you to marry them, you have to say yes, because it's rude if you don't. You can hurt someone's feelings. And, you know, so I have always said yes. See, I say yes, Bobby. That's what I do. Even when it's not good for me. So he asked me to marry him, and I said yes, and we had 5 children in 6 years and 3 months. Boom. And I was a crazy person. I didn't have any tools to deal with myself. I hadn't even begun to deal with my childhood, with the abuse issues that I had. I had these 5 gorgeous little children, 4 girls and a boy, and I knew how to dress them and feed them and clothe them and line them all up and say, be still. You know? I knew how to do the simple things. I'll tell you, this is a story that I call my snapshot. This is a picture of what I knew about how to be a mother and a wife back in those days. When I was a kid growing up out in the country outside of Billings, my mom bought her eggs from the guy that lived down the road that had a whole bunch of chickens. So when the egg cartons were empty in our house, you didn't throw them away, you put them on top of the fridge. So when she had like 4, she'd go down the road and buy the eggs, and, you know, we just recycled. And I hadn't really given this any thought. We'd been married in Charleston for about 6 months, and I had a big stack of egg cartons on my fridge. And one day my husband said to me, what are you saving those for? And I was like, I don't know, that's where they go, you know? That's what you do with them. And I mean, literally, I remember that like it was yesterday. I mean, I had no idea. I didn't think to myself, like, do I really want to model my life after my parents' life? No, they had a train wreck of a life. Do I know anyone that has any chickens? I mean, I hadn't thought about that. I just save in the egg cartons because that's what the grown-ups do, and it doesn't look like it's going to hurt anybody. So anyway, we got out of the Navy after our first child was born, and we moved back to Montana, and we proceeded to have 4 more children. And when my oldest child was 6 and my youngest was 9 months old, my husband had an affair, and we got a divorce. And I went to work in the cowboy bars, and I was about 26 years old. And just as sure as I'm standing here tonight, that what I found when I started putting booze in me on a regular basis was a power greater than myself that made life work for me for the first time. When I could put alcohol in me, I didn't have to be that scared little kid from Billings, Montana that didn't know what you all knew. I didn't have to have, it didn't make the mountain go away, but it made it not hurt so much for a while. There was a man, I lived in a little town called Red Lodge. It's about 60 miles southwest of Billings. It's a ski resort town. It's about 2,000 people live there, and there are 14 bars in that town. So you get an idea of what the, general hobbies are. Anyway, I was living in Red Lodge, and there was a man that was a member of my bar home group. If you drank in a bar, you know what I'm talking about. And we'd be in the Snag drinking. The Snag was the kind of place that you could smell before you got to it when you were walking down the sidewalk. And it was just a honky-tonk. I mean, at that time, it doesn't anymore, but at that time it had swinging wooden doors on it, just like a saloon, And in the winter, they had a Dutch door that they closed. And they had a big old pot-belly stove in there that they'd get stuffed full of wood and could keep it warm. And they had a pool table and jukebox in the corner and a poker table over here. And it was just your basic drinker's dive, So I was in the bar, and Butch used to come in and say, "Let's get drunk and be somebody." And I always said, "Let's get drunk and be somebody else." And that is exactly what makes me an alcoholic. In the big book, it says that many of us don't have to drink the length of time or take the amount that others do, and it says it's particularly true with women. It says that we often become the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few short years. That's exactly what I was like and what happened to me. When my drinking began, I found freedom for the first time. I felt happy, joyous, and free. I could be somebody else. I didn't have to have those secrets. I didn't have to be afraid of all of you. I could do things. I was brave. I worked a lot in the bars, and I made good money. I was, cute and skinny, and I thought I had it going on. I thought Red Lodge was just my utopia. It was just the perfect place for me. And alcohol caught up with me real quick. I only drank altogether about 10 years. And I was a mess. It wasn't even a third of the way through that. And I started, I was a mom that loved and cherished and neglected and abused my children all at the same time. I'm the mom that would walk in the door one night and put my arms around him and say, "God, you're just so beautiful, and I love you so much, and you can have anything in this world you want." And the next night I might walk in and smack somebody because the shoe's in the middle of the floor or whatever. With an alcoholic, in an alcoholic home, you never know what you're going to get. I heard a man describe it from the podium one night as that children who grow up in an alcoholic home learn to develop what he called computer eyes. And he said the instant you walk in the door, they can calculate, has mom had a good day or a bad day? Is she mad, or is she sad, or is she happy? Are we going to party tonight, or do we go to our rooms and be quiet, And my responsibilities started letting off. And in the beginning, I always made sure I was there when they got home from school, and that I made dinner for them and put them to bed, and then I'd get cleaned up, get dressed up, and go down to the bar. But then it became a situation where I'd get off work in the afternoon before they ever got off of school, and I'd go to the bar, and I'd start drinking. And I might show up in time to put some dinner on the table and then get cleaned up and leave again. And then later on, I wouldn't even show up. And then there was one morning, I'll never forget, I woke up and I came to, and it was about 8:30 in the morning, and they went to school at 8 o'clock. And I didn't have a phone, of course. I mean, I couldn't afford a phone. I drank a phone. You don't have luxuries like that when you need all your money to drink. And I remember waking up and thinking, oh man, they are just going to be so sad. I'm going to have to, give them some kind of reason, make up some kind of excuse about why I wasn't here. What I didn't expect is that they didn't wake up and think, oh my gosh, where is she? They woke up and thought, is she dead? Is she gone? And maybe they did what I did. They prayed for me to be dead, and they felt bad about it because I used to pray for my dad to die, and I felt horrible about that, but I didn't see any way out. So I just, it was miserable. It was horrible. At one point in there, I lost my children. I did start going to AA. I had a girlfriend who came to me one day and said, you're going to lose your kids if you don't get sober. And I said to her, my kids haven't lived with half of what I lived with as a kid. But in my gut, I knew that it was true. In my gut, I was like, she's right. So I got sober, and I hadn't drank in 5 weeks. And it was right at Christmas time. And I was miserable. You can only imagine 5 weeks dry with no solution, no help, nobody to encourage you or, that you can talk to. And so after the presents were opened on Christmas Eve and everybody was all done celebrating, I put the kids to bed and I told my oldest daughter, I need to go down to where I was working, this little restaurant. I need to go get the key because I'm opening in the morning. And she said, okay. But in my head, I thought, I've got to get drunk. And I need to get drunk right now. And it wasn't about partying. It wasn't about seeing my friends. It wasn't about hanging out. It was about get as much booze in me as fast as I can. And I told her, I'll be right back. Well, I don't know how long I was gone. I know I pounded down as many shots as I could until I was blacked out. And I woke up in my bed the next morning. And I thought, oh my God, I probably stayed out really late because that's what I always did. And I kind of fumbled around trying to test the waters a little bit. And I said, Trina, I probably stayed out too late, didn't I? She said, oh, no, you weren't that late. Don't you remember I was awake when you got home? And I was like, oh, yeah, right. I didn't know what I said, what I did. I could have really been bad-mouthing her. I could have really been abusing her. I had no idea what I had done. So the next morning, they got ready to go see their dad. They were going to spend the first part of Christmas vacation with me and the last part of Christmas vacation with him. And he came and picked them up, and they never came home. They didn't come home until they were grown. And I'm really glad I didn't know that at the time. My children were the only thing that kept me on planet Earth. They were the only thing that kept me alive. I wanted those kids so bad. They were the only good thing in my life. And, I set about to try to get sober because I knew the only way I'd get the kids back was if I was sober. And so I went to A&A, and I walked into the meeting that night in Red Lodge. There was one meeting a week. There's more meetings there now, but there was one meeting a week on a Saturday night. And I went into that meeting, and there were about 40 people in there. And I was like, wow, I thought I knew everybody in Red Lodge, but I only knew everybody that was in the bars in Red Lodge, And it turned out that this was a special occasion birthday meeting, and all the little towns around Red Lodge, from Belfry and Fromberg and Joliet and different little Bear Creek and all different places around, had all come together for a big potluck and to celebrate birthdays. So I go into this meeting, and I'm like, whoa, look at the alcoholics. And I catch on. I'm a chameleon. I can figure this out. So they go around the room, and they say their name and that they're an alcoholic. So it came my time, and I said, I'm Donna, and I'm an alcoholic. And they said, hi, Donna. But I had no idea what that meant. I had no clue what it meant to be an alcoholic. I had no idea. I knew that I had trouble with booze. I knew that I drank too much and that I got in trouble when I drank, and I knew that I was a mess. But that was all I knew. I didn't know that I suffered from a spiritual malady. I didn't know that I needed God in my life, and I needed a lot of God in my life. And I mean, if I'd have known that, I'd have run, because I was done with God. As a kid, I told you I spent all my time trying to be good enough. And part of being good enough was being on my knees reading the King James Version of the Bible and trying to make sense out of that and begging God to help me. And when God didn't help me and the beatings continued and the stuff got worse in my family, I just at some point figured God either doesn't exist or he doesn't care about what's happening here on earth, you know. And I turned it off. I said, you know what? You're going to burn me. You just turn up the heat, mister. I mean, I'm just done. I'm just done. And I turned away from God, and I did what I wanted to do. I did what pleased me. So anyway, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got 30 days the first time I was in there. And they were just thrilled that I got 30 days. They were like, oh, man, they were beside themselves. They were so excited. And they gave me a medallion. And shortly after that, I drank. And I went back into the meeting, and I was all head hung down. And I'm like, I got drunk and put my medallion on the table. And they said, oh, no, no, no. It doesn't work that way. You have to keep that. But you start over again. So by the time it was all done, I had about a box full of 30 days. I had occasionally a 60-day. At one point in there, I went to treatment, and I got out of treatment, and I was determined to stay sober, without God's help, of course, because I got this covered. I don't need God. And I think I can do it on my own. I'm going to go to meetings. Got that. And so I was going to a lot of meetings, and I was staying sober. And I had a girlfriend that had moved to Kona, Hawaii. She was my best drinking buddy. Now, this is a design that comes right out of the brain of a newcomer. This is what delusion and inspiration look like all at once. She called me up and said, you know, there's a lot of jobs to be had over here. Why don't you come on over to Kona and go to work in a couple places and save up a bunch of money, and you can go back to Montana and get the kids back. And I thought, that sounds great. Now, she was still drinking, but I was determined. Now, up until then, I went to a lot of meetings, but all I had been doing was pouring coffee and reading how it works. You know what I mean by that? I mean, that's what I watched you do, and that's what I thought you do when you do AA. You know, you're pouring coffee for people, you read how it works, you participate. When I got called on, I said the right words, they all fit in the right places. You know, I thought I was being an AA member. So when I got to Kona, I did the same thing. I went to meetings, I was pouring coffee, I was reading how it works. I didn't get a sponsor, I hadn't worked the steps, I was a loner. I was terrified of everybody. I was so terrified. I didn't want you to know how bad I hurt. I didn't want you to know that I was just dying inside. And Don and Karen were there. And I remember Don. He reached out to me a number of times. And I was in and out and in and out and in and out while I was in Kona. I had to come in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous like 7 years altogether before I finally got sober. And I remember one night, I was with my, we were talking at lunch about this today. I was with my boyfriend du jour, and Don and Karen were having a couples meeting at their house. And I went to their house. And at the end of the meeting, Don looked at me, just looked at me right in the eye. And there was just a moment there, just a flash, where I just wanted to dissolve. I just wanted to cry and say, help me. I don't know what to do. I'm dying. I hurt so bad. I don't know what to do. But then I just toughed up again. Just that window of opportunity was just open like a flash bulb, you know, and was gone again. And I just stuffed it back down. I was over in Kona and I got drunk. I had what did I have? Like 13 and a half months of sobriety after treatment. And I thought that maybe this would give me some momentum, you know, that I could like actually move on, you know, because I had over a year now. So I didn't have anything. I had over a year of sobriety, but I had a hole in me as big as the Grand Canyon. And I was so sad, and I was so angry, and I was so unhappy with my life. And I felt so cheated, and I felt like God had done it. You know, God had let me down. God is the one who dropped the ball. And I got drunk in Kona, and they have this really annoying practice that they do in Kona. They would start off the meeting with saying, is there anyone here for their first, second, or third meeting since their last drink? And then everybody would look at me to see if I'm going to raise my hand today, you know? And I mean, I did. I'd show up at the meetings. One thing I didn't do is stop going to meetings. I went to meetings, you know. I had on Tuesday what I called my triathlon. And I had a morning, noon, and a night meeting. And I never missed it on Tuesdays. And there was an afternoon women's meeting that I went to. And that day, this last day, on the 5th of May, 1987, I had 89 days of sobriety. And I was miserable. And I went to my first and second meeting, and then I went downtown. And I ordered a drink. And I started drinking. And that night I drank about everything there was. Of course, it was Cinco de Mayo. And I had, you know, a pitcher of margaritas, and I had some shots of tequila, and I had a couple of Bloody Marys, and I had whatever. I had all kinds of stuff. I mean, I should have been sick as a pup. I wasn't until the next day. But I just got wasted. And that was the time that was significant to me for one reason, and that is that was the time that alcohol didn't work. I mean, I was slurring my words. I could tell I was stumbling around a little bit, but I didn't get the click. It didn't go away. It didn't stop. In here, I was right here. The pain didn't go away. And it was like alcohol stopped working for me. And now I knew what they meant in the big book, and when people talked about alcohol not working anymore. And, that's where you come to the jumping off place. That's where it's like you can't imagine life with it, and you can't imagine life without it. You know, loneliness such as few do, and you wish for the end. You know, that's where the jumping off place comes. That's what happened to me that night. You know, I could no longer drink, and I could no longer stand being sober. So all I did was keep going to meetings, and I was in the meetings, and I was just stacking as many days together as I could before I drank, and I knew I was going to drink because I always drink. And at the end of the meeting that night, there was this man named Frank S., who I hated a lot. He was a really annoying guy, and he was about 20 years sober, and he was always picking on me. And he led the meeting, and I was sitting at the back with my arms crossed and my, get off my back look. And he said at the end of the meeting, is there anyone here that has a burning desire? And he looked at me. And when he looked at me, I just exploded. I exploded like a pressure cooker. Boom. And I just said, yeah, you know what, Frank, I got a burning desire for you, buddy. I said, you're always telling me that sober is better, and sober doesn't feel better to me. I hate this. I hate this. I hate you. I can't stand it. I don't see anything better coming in my life. I mean, I'm miserable, and I've had it. And when I shut up, there was kind of a silence went over the room. They're probably thinking, like, is she armed? And then somebody said, right on, Donna, keep coming back. And I was like, oh my God, you guys are weird, So after the meeting that night, this young man came up to me. His name was Jeff, and he had a year of sobriety. And this guy was on fire for AA. I mean, he couldn't stand himself. He was just beside himself. He was so happy. It was one of those, how are you doing? Oh, I've never had it so good, And it's like, I'm just thrilled for you, but I can't stand you. Get away from me. But anyway, Jeff came up to me that night, and I said, I don't know why this program won't work for me, but it just won't work. And he said, how many days has it been since you drank? And I said, 45 days. And all I was doing was putting as many days together as I could, but I knew I was going to drink. I wasn't even holding out for staying sober. And he said, well, what makes you think it isn't working? And I'm like, was I going too fast for you, Jeff? I mean, let me tell you this. I mean, you guys love this. You're all huggy, huggy, kissy, kissy, you know, happy, joyous, and free, and I'm not. And I don't see anything getting any better. And this was a God moment. This was a moment where God showed up in my life. And Jeff picked up a 12 and 12. Now, he had 1 year of sobriety. I don't even know how somebody with 1 year would know this. But he picked up a 12 and 12, and he opened it to the 7th step. And he showed me one sentence. And it said, in every case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. And I thought, okay, you know, okay. Maybe what I'm going through isn't for nothing. You know, and honest to God, it just bought me one more day. It wasn't anything spectacular. It just bought me one more day. The next night I went to the meeting and I met Phyllis C. She had just hit the island that day. Her husband, Johnny, had just died of brain cancer. And she was living in Paso Robles, California. And she had colon cancer. And she had a bunch of people, friends living in Kona that were long-time sober people, and they said, you know, Phyllis, just come over here and spend a month with us. Just stay with me and let us love up on you and heal you up a little bit, you know. So she hit the island that day, and they stuck her up behind the podium. Now, this lady was amazing. She just had this energy about her. You know, she was one of those people that would walk in the room and just light up the place. She had this long, frizzy Janis Joplin, black and salt and pepper gray hair, and she tied it up in big colorful silk scarves, and she had this cute little gap between her two front teeth. I just loved that. I thought that was so cute. And she wore this black dress when she was up there, and she had a bunch of jewelry, and I really liked that. But the thing I loved about her was she had this energy, you know, she had this electricity. She loved AA, and she loved drunks, and she didn't care if you were drunk or sober. She just didn't care. And I remember that she came up to me. She had a gift of being able to look around the room and pick out the sickest woman there and go right for her. And she came up to me and she said, sweetheart, you just stay by me and everything's going to be okay. She put her arm around me. And I just melted. You know, if she had told me, you know, we're going to get together and you're going to do another 4-step, or I'm going to help you, I'm going to straighten you out this time. I don't know if she'd have told me what to do or beat me up about anything. I don't know if I'd be alive today. But she didn't do that. She said, you know, if I had a daughter, she'd be just like you. She'd be really sick. And I thought that was just beautiful. So I just stuck to her like glue. I mean, I spent every minute that I could with Phyllis, and we were on the beach the next day. Oh, I got to tell you from the podium, she talked about having colon cancer, and she had had the surgery, and at that time, they didn't have what they have now for colon cancer, and she had the bag thing, and she said, it's the most expensive thing I've ever worn, and I can't show anyone. She just had, she was just so light about everything. Anyway, the next day we were on the beach, and I said, you know, Phyllis, I probably need to do another 4-step, right? And she said, no, baby, you just need to do a 1st step, that's all. And I said, how do you do a 1st step? I got it, you know, I mean, I know I'm an alcoholic, and I know my life's unmanageable. What do you mean? And she said, there's implied action. She said, it says we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives are unmanageable, and the implied action there is that you need to find a power greater than you are that will solve your problem. And she said, you've been trying to do this for a long time, and it's not working. She said, maybe you should consider something else. And I'm like, all right, you know. She said, you know, are you okay with that? I said, yeah. She said, okay, then tell me about your higher power. So I started telling her about the churches I went to when I was a kid, you know, the basic, fundamental Christian stuff. And she interrupted me. Now she was a very spiritual woman, but she was also religious. I mean, she went to church and she, you know, had firm beliefs in what she believed in. But she interrupted me. She cut me off and she said, let me tell you something. Any God that you can understand will be too small for your needs. And I'd never heard that before. She said, you've been trying to do this a long time and it's not working. She said, why don't you try something else? And I'm like what, you know? I mean, she's from California. You never know what you're going to get. So She said, think about this. When you lay down at night and go to sleep, your lungs inflate and deflate all night long, and your heart beats all night long, and there's nothing that you do before you go to bed that makes that happen. And I said, all right. She said, when your time on this earth is up, there is nothing you could do to add one more minute to your time on this planet. When your time is up, you're gone. And I thought, okay. And she said, then that is a power greater than yourself. That's something you didn't create, and it's something you can't control. And she said, if you wake up in the morning and you're breathing, then you are a spiritual being, and God loves you as if you were his only child. And she said, if you ever wake up and you're not breathing, you won't be here. She said, the spirit that is within you that makes you Donna, when it leaves your body, goes with the Spirit, goes with the Father. And I was just blown away. I'd never heard anything like that. I thought, wow, you know, when she said the only child part, I thought if I could find a God that loved me half as much as I love my kids, I bet that would be enough for me. You know, that would do it. And I went home and thought about this. Oh, I'm just like so working this out in my brain. And I went back into the meetings in Kona and told them I had a new higher power, and it was my breath. And they said, that's nice, just keep coming back, you know. But I meant it, and I wasn't being, you know, sarcastic. What I did was when I opened my mouth and I inhaled to pray, I could feel the air on the back of my tongue. And it was the first time in my life that I had ever gone within to find a place of peace. Ever gone within. I'd always been looking to some God out here somewhere that may or may not help me depending on if I'm good. And that's not what she said. She said, you know, she showed me the place in the big book that says deep within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And it says in the final analysis, it is only there that he may be found. And that's where I found my peace. That's where it began. It was incredible. Phyllis gave me, I said, well, what do I call him? Because I wasn't about to call him God. I was all done with God, you know. And she said, well, you could call him God. I'm like, slow down, you know. I mean, this is a lot. So she said, just keep it simple. Call him whatever you want. Call him your creator. Call him the great mystery. Call him, you know, the Father. Call him whatever you're comfortable with. Call him God. Call him whatever. And I said, well, what do I do? And she said, tonight when you're alone, I want you to get on your knees and say a prayer like this. Put it in your own words. Say it however you want to say it. But the basic idea is, God, I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you want from me. But if you want anything to do with what's left of my life, then come on, because I don't know where to go from here. And, you know, I thought that was the most honest prayer I'd ever prayed. I mean, there was no bargaining. There was no, I'll do this if you'll do that. You know, I was always like, I'll be good, I'll be good, I'll be really good. You know, I don't know how successful you are at that, but I can only be really, really, really good for just a little while. And then I'm going to be that. You know, I'm going to do something I shouldn't do, or buy something I shouldn't buy, or get a new tattoo, or whatever. You know, I'm going to do something that in my mind tells me, now that you haven't been good, God's not going to help you. Because I thought you had to be good for God to help you. And she said, no. She said, if you wake up and you're breathing, it's a done deal. She said, I'm not asking you to decide what philosophy you're going to follow, or what, you know, what religion you might have. You just put those questions on the back burner and address yourself to God and see what happens. And that was the beginning of my sobriety. You know, I was sick. I was sick as a pup. You know, I was 45 days sober. I was just, you know, going to meetings, and I was determined that I was going to, you know, give it a go. And I was real excited about the breath. In Hawaii, they call white people howlies. And that's not a derogatory term. What it means is man without breath. Because when the whites arrived on the island, they were so fair, they thought they were dead. So they called them howlies. And I thought that was really cool. You know, it fell right in line with what I'm talking about. So anyway, I was excited, and I started going about this with a whole new tack. I went to the meeting a few days later, a noon meeting, and I walked into that meeting and I met God's will for my life. You'll never believe it. In walked this guy who had 17 years of sobriety, and I had 45 days, and he was looking for somebody to mold, and I was looking for somebody to be my higher power with skin on them, because it was pretty scary for me to trust God, you know, God or God. And so he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And we got married, and we had 15-year marriage, and it was not a good marriage. It was not good, and it was very unhealthy, and it caused a lot of damage. But I got to tell you, I'm not sorry for 1 minute I spent in that marriage, because I learned a lot. I learned that how I am treated is not what I'm worth. That's what I found out. It took me 15 years to learn it, but that's what I found out. That marriage ended, and you know, I just didn't know what to do. I got to tell you that before that marriage ended, I was coming up on 7 years sober. And how we doing? We're good? I was coming up on 7 years sober, and my son, my only son, committed suicide. And he was living in Montana, and I got a phone call one afternoon that Daniel had jumped off an 85-foot cliff and was dead. And it blew my entire mind. I mean, this is not what I got sober for. I still thought that, you know, when they told me when you do the right things happen, and I thought that meant you're not going to hurt anymore, you know, and that's not the way it was. And I was devastated. And to me, I went right to God with that. God's to blame for that. What's this about? I mean, I'm finally sober. I'm finally doing sponsoring. I'm being sponsored. I'm, you know, doing book studies. I'm doing all the right things. I'm married to the right guy, I think. And this wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, it broke my heart. It broke my spirit. It broke everything. And I began to doubt it all. But you know what I did? I was completely and totally devastated, but I didn't know what else to do but stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, when I talked to Karen last night, and I told her, I said, I can't believe that I'm seeing you, and yet I'm not surprised, because this is what we do, you know? This is where we come. And I continued to stay in the rooms. I went to all the meetings. In fact, I went to a meeting every day for a year, because I was afraid of what I would do. I thought if I miss one, I'll miss 10. I kept all my commitments. I continued to go to the prison and the women's jail, and I continued to sponsor. However, my sponsees all left me. They all decided to get different sponsors, and they left. And I was really confused about that. I was like, what the heck, man? I mean, what happened to this we never go through anything alone deal, you know? But the truth is, as I look back on it now, if I had somebody or a group of somebodies to hold on to, I wouldn't have been pressed to find God like I did. I mean, it was a crucial time in my life. It was either find God or die. And Daniel was 19 years old. I hadn't seen him since he was 14, and I saw him one time. And he was now 19 years old, and he was a month after his 19th birthday. He woke up one day and said, I can't live like this anymore. And I've already been to AA, and it didn't work, because I saw him in AA, and he was pouring coffee and reading how it works. You know, he was doing what we do, but he wasn't getting what we get. And, you know, if you're in at any level of sobriety and you find yourself thinking, you know, same stuff, different day, it's not. It's not same stuff, different day. Sobriety is an adventure. It's always going to be growing. It's always going to be changing. I have been blessed with the gift of desperation throughout my entire sobriety, because I have been, you know, desperate to stay sober. I haven't had any real comfortable times where I just got to stroll along. I've always been fueled by some kind of fire that perpetuated me to go to more meetings and do more work and read the book more and pray more and meditate and try to find the God of my understanding. And after Daniel died, I did anything I could think of doing short of sacrificing small animals to try to find God. I mean, I did everything. I had these things called medicine cards, and they're a Native American approach where you have these cards and you turn 2 cards each day and you read out of them, and it's like a daily meditation thing. And they don't have any powers. They're not like tarot cards or anything, but I would read those and I would write in my journal. Somebody told me about keeping a spiritual journal, and I started writing my prayers to God every day and making sure that when I start a sentence with a capital letter and end it with a period, I have formed a complete thought. And I thought, when I do this, I have absolute proof that I have tried to make conscious contact with the God of my understanding today. And so I kept I've got volumes of these spiritual journals that I've kept over the years. 2 years and 9 months after Daniel died, my second daughter died. She was 25 years old, and she was 5 years sober in the rooms of AA. She was married and had a little girl that was 3 years old, and she was just a dynamo. They called her name was Tracy, and they called her Tracer the Racer. She was just a go-get-em, sponsored a bunch of women, real active in the rooms, and she just got sick and died. She died November 5th. She got sick Halloween night and died November 5th. And she got a virus that melted her heart. And it turns out there was only 63 cases ever diagnosed in the whole world. But what I'm talking to you about is not about what I learned like a million things through all this. There's a big difference between grief and self-pity. Actually there's a fine line between grief and self-pity. And in the beginning of these losses, I believe personally that we're entitled to a little self-pity here and there, but I can't afford to stay in that. And I have to be diligent to stay on top of that and to continue to ask God for help and to continue to, I would write in my journals, I need you in every breath today. I need you in every breath. Please help me to find my way. I am lost. I can't find you at all. I can't find your peace. And after about a year of this, I got to where I gave up on God one more time. I just said, you know what? I'm done. I have been breaking my neck for all these years trying to stay sober and maintain a conscious contact with God as I understand him, and he's not showing up. And so I'm done. And I have to tell you for the first 2 days, I felt a huge relief. It was like, okay, now I can stop trying, Now I could just let it go. And the third day, it hit me like a wall falling on me. It was like, oh my God, do you know how much trouble I'm in if there is no God? I am so screwed. And what do? When you don't believe in God, you pray. And in those days, I had no peace whatsoever. But I would set my timer on my microwave for 10 minutes, and I would put my butt on the couch. I would close my eyes, and I would sit there with my eyes closed for 10 minutes until the timer went off. And there, I have done my job. I have tried to meditate for 10 minutes. Good enough. Now you do your job. And, that was how I had to struggle with it. It's been amazing because not only have I survived the death of those kids and 2 sponsors that died in the same time period, but I have thrived. I am happy, joyous, and free today. I have a freedom that I would never have known any other way. I'm blessed in so many ways. I've made peace with my family. It's all good. It's all good. I'm free. I'm a free woman. And, it's just like, but I expected life to stop playing hardball with me. And have I got like about 5 more minutes maybe, or 10? Okay, they say yes. So, sorry if your butts get sore. It's important that I share this. I wanted to share this for Jack. But, life continues to play hardball. I mean, it's all over the map. It's good, bad, happy, sad, ugly, nice. beautiful. Some people win the lottery. Some people get dirt in the face, you know. I mean, that's the way life goes. It rains on all of us, not just the good and not just the bad. It rains for everybody. And, you know, I have learned to come off of my Cinderella pink cloud that says that life's supposed to be good now that I'm sober. You know, life is excellent, but in a different way. You know, in the promises, it says we will find a new peace and a new happiness. Not the happiness I knew before, a new one, a different kind of happiness, a new kind of peace. And I am grateful for that. 2 years ago in last March, so coming up on 3 years ago, I was coming home from work one day, and it was a beautiful day. It was St. Patty's Day, March 17th, 2011. And I was on our little 2-lane highway. We live on a farm out in the country outside of Billings in a little town called Huntley. And I was stopped on the road waiting for a big line of traffic coming this direction, and I'm trying to make a left-hand turn. So I got my blinker on, I got my brakes on, I got my seatbelt on, the whole thing. I'm doing fine. I didn't see a thing. I didn't see it coming at all. And I got rear-ended by a lady doing 65 miles an hour. And it just took my car and bent it in two. It broke my seat, and I got thrown into the back seat, and I got a concussion, but I also got a permanent brain injury out of it. And it's not expected to improve. I mean, it was a real gloomy outlook when I first got the diagnosis. I got the neck injury and the low back injury and that kind of stuff, but to me that was peanuts compared to the brain injury. That was such a challenge. I mean, it was horrible. At first, I didn't even know how much I'd been hurt. I tried to go back to work. I was just working at a little deli in Huntley. I was messing up. I was making mistakes. I was griping at people. I was, you know, I had horrible mood alterations, you know, that would last for days at a time. My balance was horrible. I mean, I was falling all the time. My memory shot, couldn't remember a thing. I remember walking up to a table one day and saying, you know, can I take your order? And they said, well, we gave it to you. It's in the oven. You know, and I don't remember ever seeing them before. And, you know, it's scary. I'd drive into Billings to go do something, and I'd forget where I was going, or I would lose my way. I was like, where is that again? I mean, I grew up in Billings. I know that place like the back of my hand, but I couldn't find my way. I'd have to pull over and like think. Where was I going? I left the house. I was going to do what, you know? Writing notes all the time. I finally, after a year, the doctors just kept telling me, be patient, be patient. It takes a long time, it takes a long time. I went back to the doctor and I said, this is not working. You know, it's getting no better. In fact, if anything, it's worse. I was sleeping like 14 hours a day. It was just awful. And it was so hard on our marriage. It was just really tough, you know. I mean, Bob was wonderful and took good care of me. I mean, he treats me like a queen. He took really good care of me. But, you know, that in itself, I mean, after a couple of years of that, it takes the toll. You know, the spouse pays a price for that as well. You know, it's not just the person suffering, it's the people around them too. And I was sick. I was so sick, and so my brains were just scrambled. And then when I started realizing, I was sent to a cognitive speech therapist who put me through a battery of tests. And she said, you need to go see a lawyer. So I went and got a lawyer, and he sent me to a specialist in Iowa who is a professor at the University of Iowa for brain injuries. He's a neurologist and a brain surgeon and a psychologist. And so he put me through a big battery of tests all day long. And I came out of there knowing exactly what part of my brain is injured, and with the diagnosis in black and white saying that this is a permanent brain injury, it's not expected to improve. However, in time I will learn to negotiate. And I went through maybe the first part of that. I was like, okay, now I've got a diagnosis. Now maybe somebody will pay attention to me. And it was a matter of battling it out. I couldn't get to the right doctors. I couldn't get to anybody who would listen to me. And, but I finally started getting a little bit of help. But then about that time, the reality started dawning on me when I realized I'm not me anymore. I'm not the me that I was. And I started just going down. I mean, I was down. I had no spark. I had no enthusiasm. I mean, I was still going out and speaking a little bit, but people would say to me, "You're so different, you know, you're so different." And I knew I was, but I couldn't do anything about it, you know, and it was nothing that I made happen. It was such a helpless feeling. And the lawyer was talking to me one day, and he said, "You know, you've got to go to therapy. You need to go to get some counseling to help you with this." And I said, "You know what? In all of my life, the lesson I have learned, if it's none other, it's that when something like this happens, it comes down to surrender. It always comes down to surrender." Phyllis had this wonderful little thing that she did. Remember those little flags that she made? I've got one. I've still got my Phyllis flag. A toothpick with a little white piece of paper on it. She would make a whole bag full of those, and she'd come into the meeting and hand one to everybody in there. And I remember saying, "I've already got one." She said, "Well, take another one." And she said, "You know, surrender is the key to the program. Surrender is the key." Now, I don't know about you, but I have to be surrendered. I can't voluntarily surrender. I can't make that happen on my own. Prayed for God to soften my heart. I prayed for God to soften me instead of being angry. And it took me a good 2 years before I began to kind of come around a little bit. Now, I still really goof things. I still forget things. Bad decisions. You know, it said in this diagnosis that it would affect my executive decision making, my balance, my memory, my sense of taste. It changed my eyesight. It changed my hearing aid prescription. It's amazing what something like that can do. You know, changed my taste in food. I couldn't eat meat for the longest time. I just didn't eat meat. The texture of it or the smell of it, I couldn't stand it. So I was a vegetarian for about a year and stopped eating sweets. I just lost my flavor for sweets, which is not a bad thing. And I was able to lose about 30 pounds, which is a good thing. But anyway, you know, one more time, God has always been there. God has always been there. Great things that happen in spite of the loss. Now, I'm not happy for losing my daughter and my son. I'm not happy for any of the things that have happened. But I'm really happy for what happened to me because of it. Because I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it wasn't for those experiences. If it wasn't for the time of having to desperately seek God. You know, our book says that God could and would if he were sought. It doesn't say God could and would if he were found. And there are dark nights of the soul. You know, there are times when we can't find God even though he's all around us. He's got us right here in the palm of his hand. We can't find him. And I went through some of those times. Long run is that I have a sweet relationship with my higher power today. It is so precious to me. I am loved and treasured. You know, Don Maloney always called me precious. He always called everybody precious. And that was just his thing, you know. Oh, God, what a great man. He's leaving a big hole here for a lot of people. But I want to honor him tonight, and I want to say thank you for inviting me to Brazos, and thank you for giving me your attention.